Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining us this week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network. With us on the program today, Pat Brown, author of the book The Profiler, My Life Hunting Serial Killers and Psychopaths. Pat, welcome to This Week in America. Great to have you with us on the program.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Well, there's so many interesting things to talk about, and as I read the book, and then I followed the Vandersloot deal, I'm thinking this is almost a textbook example of what you talk about. That law enforcement is either overworked in many cases, incompetent in some cases. People, for some reason, get away and they continue to perpetrate crimes, whether they're killers or serial rapists or whatever. And it almost looks like this is a perfect example. Here's a guy that should have been busted 5 years ago, arrested twice, let go, and he perpetrates, another murder. Does he fall into that category that happens all too often?
Well, yeah, and it's kind of funny because people point fingers at Aruba and I go, we should never go on vacation in Aruba because they're horrible people down there because Joran van der Sloot got away with it. And then I'm thinking, well, in my case, no vacation in any of our 50 states.
Well, yes, yes.
We're not perfect either, folks. We all have a lot of work to do with the criminal justice system. And unfortunately, what happens is there's so many levels that can be problematic. So you have the initial law enforcement level, police work at the scene, and then you've got the ongoing work, and then you've got media issues, and then you've got the prosecutorial issues. And, there's so many different things that can affect whether a person actually goes to prosecution. Sometimes the police do a bang-up job, and the prosecutor won't cooperate, or sometimes they mess up and the prosecutor can't prosecute. Sometimes the serial killer, if it's a serial killer, simply because it's a stranger homicide and he jumps out of the bushes and, by the time you find the body, you're just kind of looking around and you're going, wow, let's see, how many people live in this city? Wonder who did it. Some are just very, very difficult to solve, and serial homicides are the hardest ones to solve of all. Now, with Joran van der Sloot, of course, on the other hand, we all kind of know who was with Natalie when she went missing, and we all know who said he put Natalie's body in the water, so I'm a little mystified about why they can't go forward with a prosecution in that case. I know they don't have a body, but they have a pretty good amount of evidence, so it all depends on the system, and each system has kind of they have to say you have to the bar is this high of what we need to have before we can go to convict on the person, and so I don't know exactly what the Rubin system is doing and why they don't think they can go forward with it.
Well, as many people watch, they go, I knew he was a serial killer, and you saying, no, he's a serial rapist.
Right. I don't think he is a serial killer now, at least at this point. Now, that doesn't mean I call him a serial date rapist. It doesn't mean he can't become something else. Sometimes people, for example, sometimes they're a serial rapist, and one day one of your victims gets away and she rats you out. And so the next time you get out of prison, you're like, well, I'm not leaving them alive anymore because, they're gonna rat me out. I'm gonna go back to prison, so now I'm gonna kill them all. So you might become go from a serial rapist to a serial killer. I've seen serial killers go back to serial rape, but sometimes some of them have done both of them. But I think Joran van der Sloot is a serial date rapist. In other words, he likes to take a girl someplace. He thinks he's the cat's meow, and every girl's going to fall for him. And if she doesn't, he'll make sure she does. But he's expecting to get sex, and if he gets it, all's well and good. And if the girl's out there having a good time, she thinks he's cute, and she doesn't mind going home with him, he might get what he wants. But I do believe that on occasions he might push the issue if the girl doesn't want to cooperate, either just by forcing her into it or by giving her something that makes her so incapacitated she just doesn't fight back. But I think he ran into two girls who did fight, and I think that's what went wrong. And right now they're not calling this an attempted sexual assault down in Peru, but Stephanie doesn't have her pants and shoes on, so and Joran confesses to taking them off, only he says he did it after she was dead, which makes pretty much no sense. So I'm assuming we're having a sexual assault here. The evidence points to that. So I do believe he's sexually assaulting her, and she fought back. So, but I don't think he's a serial killer because if he were, he wouldn't pick his hotel room to take his victim back to kill her. I mean, it really makes no sense once you signed your own name on the register. So he would have taken her to a park and done her in. So I don't think he is a serial killer at this point, but he's a serial date rapist with a really bad attitude.
Well, yeah, and he seems to enjoy manipulating. He says, yeah, I did it. I'll show you where the body is. No, I didn't. I'm just playing with you. Is that typical of the mind of somebody who commits these crimes?
Once he's caught. Yeah, when he was doing all those little interviews. Yeah, some serial killers are quiet. The psychopaths. Psychopaths all try to manipulate, but they don't all open their big mouths about their crimes. Some serial killers, for example, will never never give up any information to anybody. They'll kill off their victim, and then they'll go back and eat a hamburger and go on with their lives until they feel like doing it again. And 40 years later, you find out who it is, and you go, wow, really? He never said a thing to anybody. But he's still a manipulative schmuck. And, and Joran van der Sloot is a perfect, if you open up your dictionary now to go to your 2010 dictionary of a psychopath, what is a psychopath, and you open up to that, his picture's going to be sitting in there because he's everything a psychopath is. He's incredibly arrogant, totally narcissistic, has no empathy for anybody. Everything's about him. He wants what he wants, very impulsive. He lies. He's a pathological liar. Boy, is he a pathological liar. I mean, he's such a great example. I think you're going to use him in classrooms for, years to come, because I've never seen anybody tell that many lies in public, so you can track them all.
Well, yeah.
But if you know somebody that has those same traits, you probably know a psychopath.
Well, it's interesting. We're talking to Pat Brown on This Week in America, our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Pat's new book is called The Profiler, My Life Hunting Serial Killers and Psychopaths. A couple of websites, patbrownprofiling.com is excellent. In fact, it's a great resource if you want to go there. A lot of free information, whether you're a family that feels, they have someone in the family that feels threatened, a bullying situation, intimidation on the workforce. If you've got a loved one who's unfortunately lost their life, I mean, law enforcement, you can go get a lot of information from that. Something that's interesting is as I'm reading the book, you basically started with, not that many years ago, you're a housewife, there's a murder. You think you know that the new person you took in is a boarder, and he had characteristics like I've seen in van der Sloot where the guy would lie. You couldn't believe anything the guy said. And out of the, you felt this guy committed a murder. You go to the cops, and your career started basically, although you hadn't started a career at that point, they called you a busybody woman and told you basically to go away and get a life.
Well, pretty much, yeah. I had a very unusual route into this business. And this
to say the least, yes.
Of the book. I was a homemaker and a homeschooler, and I suspected that a guy I rented a room to that was dating one of my girlfriends, that he might have committed a sexual homicide. Because she had broken up with him, and the day they broke up, he walked down a path between our houses, and this girl ended up dead between them. And I found out, the next day he had confessed to being there at the time that the girl was killed, but he said he kind of veered away from that spot at that moment and waded across some stream, and he threw all his clothes away, and there were so many weird things about this guy, and during the 4 weeks he was in my house, he did exhibit all of those things of the psychopath. He was telling one weird story after another. Was a pack of lies. He had very much no empathy, especially for this victim. I said, this poor girl got murdered on the path, and he's like, oh, well, whatever. I'm like, okay then. So, he did exhibit all those psychopathic tendencies. And I did take this evidence into the police, and I expected them to do something about it, and they just didn't. And I was really shocked, and they just tossed it off like, well, why are you bothering us? And I was stunned because I thought, well, I'm not saying he committed this crime. I'm saying if he's an awfully interesting person of interest, you should be at least checking him out. And it took me 6 years to get that case reopened. Finally, a new detective did check it out, and he was finally brought in, and he was interrogated, failed a polygraph, and they said, we think this is our guy. We're pretty sure of it. But unfortunately, the DNA was non-existent, and he now lives about a mile down the road from me. And so this is not an anomaly in this case. We have so many cases, and if you start looking around your neighborhood, you'll see there's a lot of cases there. Doesn't mean we don't know who did it, but they're not prosecuted. And when you read this book, I'm taking the people, the readers, into many different cases I've worked on, and they'll learn a lot about profiling and how to profile themselves, and they'll see how these things go down. They'll get into the minds of the killers and they'll see what happens to the victims. But they'll also be very shocked that when I've been brought into a lot of these cases, it's 2 or 3 or 5, 10 years too late, and you can see, wow, by the evidence here that Pat is presenting and profiling, I'm in agreement with her. I think we know who did it. And yet the prosecution doesn't go forward, so we know that guy's still out there, and that guy's still out there, and this other guy is still out there. And that's what's scary, and that's one of the reasons I'm working very hard now to bring profiling into the early parts of the investigation, to have detectives do their own profiling or to bring in criminal profiles in the first 24, 48 hours, first week, so that the case doesn't go down the wrong road.
Well, and you've said there are very few.
It's too late.
Well, yeah, and you said there are very few independent profilers out there like yourself. You basically have profilers with the FBI, and that's pretty much it at this point.
It is, and when I first started into this profession, I started doing television. They kept saying, "And we're here with ex-FBI agent Pat Brown, or retired FBI agent." I'm like, "Wait a minute, guys! I'm not with the FBI, and I'm not retired." But they had so few independent profilers, they really didn't know what they, that there were any. And I'm hoping to encourage a lot more, because we need more profilers in every state, in every police department, every police jurisdiction, so that somebody has the time and the skills, the training to analyze cases thoroughly in the early stages. Because, a lot of detectives, they really just don't get the training. It's not their fault. They just, they could become a detective, and they're lucky if they get any, if the department has any money to pay for any training. And some of them are just so overworked. I mean, D.C. one year, I think we had a homicide for every day of the year. I mean, how long do you have to work on a case if you're running around trying to, get all the information and, do all the interviews, and then next day you get another case on your desktop, So we need somebody there who can dedicate themselves, and while the detective's running around getting the information, doing all the rest of it, he can come back and say, what have you found out? And me or another profiler can say, hey, here's what I've been looking at for the last 24 hours. Looks like this, and that, and that'll help them be able to focus their investigation. And we need that in a lot of police jurisdictions, and so that's the training that I'm trying to push around the country.
Well, it's interesting because you are laying yourself out there. Like I said, you go to the website. You talk in the book, you're not a very good businbusinesswoman because you keep giving these services away, but you're so fervent about, you want to get this done. You want to get the word out there.
Yeah, I've done pro bono work for 14 years with profiling for police departments, and people think that's kind of nuts. But, it has served a purpose. Certainly helped, when I started, it gave me great training, and it's given me so much work over the decade and a half that when I go to do police training, I have a lot of experience, to bring to them, and it keeps them sort of in the loop with profiling. That this profiler out there is willing to work with them, and the police department simply don't have the money to bring us in. I hope one day that changes. That's why I'd like to get somebody on staff or in a police jurisdiction, or at least within a state, that they can move around and do the work for different police departments, because they, each individual one probably can't afford it. But it's not the best business plan in the world, but that's okay. I mean, I'm hoping to see a change over time, and I think I will. And we got to get more of these killers off the street, because it's kind of scary out there.
Well, and you hear some of these statistics, and when you throw it in the book, and you talk about an epidemic of sexual homicides. The book, by the way, is The Profiler: My Life Hunting Serial Killers and Psychopaths by Pat Brown. They talk about 80% closure, and you say, actually, it's about closer to 5%, because the only ones they're closing are the ones that are pretty easy to figure out, because the victim and the perpetrator know each other.
Exactly. I mean, most crimes are like that. I mean, crimes are usually done in a rage, and it usually is somebody who's it's a domestic, it's somebody, it's friends, somebody knows somebody. And since they do it in a rage, they usually don't have it very well planned out. But with sexual homicides, they're very difficult, because I say they basically target a stranger, and they wait for an opportunity. And they don't just, say, well, gee, I got to do it now. I mean, they'll say, okay, I can wait a day. I'm going to hang in this bush for 4 hours until it gets dark and somebody comes on by. Or they watch a girl in their house, and they wait for that opportunity to grab her out of to go in her house and break in when nobody's around. So these are very difficult crimes, and if we don't have good techniques, and I think our techniques need improving, because it doesn't. I say when you catch somebody 40 years later, that is not really a success. But interesting enough, what can happen when you catch somebody and then you say, okay, what other crimes did you commit, and you start racking up all the crimes they committed, you can increase your closure rate overnight by a whole lot. But it doesn't mean that you saved all those people's lives.
Yes.
It's a little too late. And all you're doing is giving this creep, a nice retirement, because he's now 60 years old. And he's going into his retirement home instead of going, and he's going to get his meals paid for. So it's not really punishment for him, and it certainly isn't justice. 20 women have died while we're getting around to finding out who did it. So we really need to improve the system so we catch them on their first crime or their second crime, so we don't, they don't keep doing it. But it's going to take a lot of work to change a lot of these methodologies.
We've only got a couple minutes left. I have to ask, and you talk about the qualities, and you say basically common sense and logic. Those are two keys, and you need to keep an open mind, and common sense seems to be something we all are lacking in from time to time. And those are basically the tools of your trade.
Logic is very, very important, and a lot of people think that profiling is psychic stuff. And I've even seen some people who, they read my book, and they'll still write up things, oh, Pat uses her gut feeling. I'm like, no, that's what I'm against. I'm against gut feeling. I don't use my gut feeling. I'm using the evidence, and this is the whole point of profiling. You're supposed to look at all the forensic evidence, all the behavioral evidence. You're supposed to build what happened at the crime scene and who did it, what the motive is, based on evidence, and all the supporting evidence. And when I write out a profile, I try to detail every reason I say something. So if I'm going to say that guy's a white guy, or that guy's a black guy, or it's even a guy and not a girl, I better have a darn good reason for it, not just say, oh, I think he seems like a guy. He seems like a loser.
Right.
He seems like, just don't make up stuff. And a lot of profiling in the past actually has been kind of vague, and it really hasn't been based on the evidence. That's called inductive profiling, but I do deductive. It's kind of like the Sherlock Holmes stuff. So this is the kind of profiling I'd like to see out there, based on logic and not gut feeling. Is that really gut feeling can take you down a really bad road.
Well, you've really touched.
You realize that you haven't followed any evidence and you're in the wrong place, it's too late to go back.
You've touched a lot of people. You've helped a lot of people. You're sort of redefining the role of criminal profiler in the college course you've put together in a lot of the work that you're doing, the Society for Investigative Criminal Profiling. It's an excellent book, The Profiler, My Life Hunting Serial Killers and Psychopaths. It's written by Pat Brown, our guest on This Week in America. Pat's website is patbrownprofiling.com. Our website, thisweekinamerica.us. You can log on, get information, link on, and get a copy of Pat's book that way as well. Pat, thank you for joining us on the program.
Well, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.